Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to go deep? Today we're diving into the world of algorithms.
Algorithms.
Yeah, all those mathematical models that seem to be like everywhere these days.
It really is remarkable how they're everywhere.
Yeah, like shaping our lives, but
Yeah.
most people don't even really understand like how they work
Right.
or what happens when they don't work.
Yeah, and, we're interacting with them all the time and we don't even realize it.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to get into today. So to help us understand this a little better, we're turning to Cathy O'Neil's book, Weapons of Math Destruction, to see just how these models can actually cause harm,
Yeah.
especially to people who are already vulnerable.
And O'Neill calls these harmful algorithms WMDs.
And
MDs.
She doesn't mean that lightly.
So not just any algorithm that makes a mistake is a WMD.
Right.
What are the specific characteristics that make something a WMD?
There are three key elements. The first one is opacity,
Opacity.
and that is the workings of the model are hidden from the people being judged by it.
So no transparency. Yeah, it's like being scored by a system that you can't understand, let alone challenge.
Okay, so no transparency. Got it. What's the second element?
The second element is scale.
Okay.
So a WMD isn't just applied to a small group. It operates on a massive scale, impacting tons of people.
Huge numbers of people,
Right.
like credit scores.
Exactly, credit scores, affecting millions of financial decisions every day,
So that brings us to the third element.
which is damage.
Yeah.
And these aren't just theoretical problems. These are causing real tangible damage to people and to communities.
So these aren't just hypothetical things that could go wrong. These are things that are actually going wrong.
They're actually causing harm.
Okay, so real damage is happening.
Yes, they can perpetuate inequalities, limit opportunities, and even erode basic freedoms.
So this is where it starts to feel like we're living in an episode of Black Mirror,
Right.
because O'Neill in her book gives some like pretty startling real-world examples.
Yep.
And you'll be surprised by how many areas of life are affected by this.
Okay.
So let's dive into a few. One that really struck me was the use of algorithms in teacher evaluations.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine, right, dedicating years to your students only to have your career judged by a flawed mathematical model.
And O'Neill tells the story of Tim Clifford,
Yeah.
a teacher whose performance scores swung wildly from one year to the next.
Oh, wow.
So he got a 6 one year and then the next year a 96.
That's a huge swing, despite his teaching methods staying consistent.
Yeah, and it's hard to imagine a human evaluator being that inconsistent.
Yeah, you would think a human would be able to see through that.
Right.
But that's exactly it. This shows how these models can lack statistical rigor and transparency,
Right.
and they reduce a complex profession like teaching down to a single number,
Into just one number.
which can make or break somebody's career.
That's right.
It really makes you wonder about
Yeah.
the reliability of any ranking system, right?
It does.
Speaking of rankings, let's talk about college rankings.
All right.
Something I know we all stressed over at some point in our lives.
Yes, I definitely did.
You know those U.S. News college rankings?
Oh, yeah, those have enormous influence.
They have a huge impact.
Huge. And it turns out some colleges have actually figured out how to manipulate the algorithm to climb higher in the rankings.
So it's not just about academic excellence.
Well, the model relies heavily on proxies,
Proxies.
like SAT scores and acceptance rates.
Oh, so like stand-ins for the real thing.
Right. So colleges can game the system by focusing on recruiting high-achieving, full tuition-paying students.
Even if they don't end up going there.
Exactly.
So they might boost their ranking,
Yeah,
but not actually boost their educational value.
exactly.
That's wild.
O'Neill uses the example of TCU,
TCU.
who successfully manipulated the U.S. News model and saw their ranking climb significantly.
But did their quality of education actually improve?
That's debatable.
That's really interesting. It makes you wonder if we're focusing on the wrong metrics.
Yeah, it does.
But let's move beyond education. These WMDs reach into even more sensitive areas like the for-profit college industry.
Yeah, that's one that's come under a lot of scrutiny,
A lot of scrutiny.
especially with the 90-10 rule, which is a regulation requiring for-profit colleges to drive at least 10% of their revenue from sources other than federal aid.
So that's put a lot of pressure on those institutions.
Yeah, a lot of pressure.
How are they responding to that pressure?
Well, they're turning to sophisticated marketing tactics.
Oh, so like target marketing.
Right. And they're using WMDs to target low-income students.
Who rely heavily on federal student aid.
Exactly.
And the problem is graduates of for-profit colleges often face worse job prospects than those from community colleges, despite taking on way more debt.
Way more debt.
It's almost as if the system is designed to exploit their hope for upward mobility.
Right.
And then there's the predatory nature of payday loans, which seemed like a textbook example of a WMD in action.
Payday lenders prey on people in desperate situations, offering quick cash with ridiculously high interest rates.
Outrageous interest rates.
And their algorithms rely on data brokers and lead generators to find vulnerable people.
Vulnerable individuals.
Yeah.
So it's not just an unfortunate business model. It's a calculated system.
It is a calculated system.
Designed to trap borrowers in a cycle of debt.
Absolutely.
But even within this kind of bleak landscape, there are some people who are trying to use data for good.
Right.
O'Neill talks about Zest Finance, which claims to use alternative data,
Okay.
like cell phone bill payments, to offer fair payday loans.
Interesting.
It's an interesting concept, but it raises a lot of questions, like, is it fair to judge someone's creditworthiness based on things like their spelling or how quickly they fill out an online application?
That's a really crucial point because those seemingly neutral data points can be proxies for things like socioeconomic status or even race.
Well, so it could perpetuate existing inequalities, even though it doesn't sound like it would.
Right.
And this problem extends beyond finance, too.
Yeah.
O'Neill dives deep into the world of predictive policing.
Yeah.
Another area where algorithms are raising serious concerns. We've all heard of programs like Predpol, which claim to predict where crimes will occur. It sounds good in theory, but where are the problems?
Well, the concern is that by focusing on low-level offenses,
Level offense.
like loitering or public urination,
Okay.
these models create a self-fulfilling prophecy.
A self-fulfilling process.
More police are sent to already over-policed neighborhoods, leading to more arrests for these minor offenses.
And who are those people most likely to be?
Poor and minority communities.
So they bear the brunt of this algorithmic bias.
Absolutely.
So geography becomes a proxy for race in a lot of cases.
It does.
O'Neill shares the chilling story of Robert McDaniel, a young man in Chicago who was visited by police simply because his name was on a list of potential criminals.
Wow.
Generated by an algorithm.
He hadn't even committed a crime.
No, he had not.
This is a great example of how these models can erode basic freedoms and reinforce existing biases.
Yeah.
And this algorithmic bias is rampant in the job market, too. I know we've all felt like our resumes just disappear into a black hole sometimes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like you're just shouting into the void.
Definitely.
Is it just our imagination, or does that actually happen?
Well, it's not just our imagination. Automated resume screening systems and personality tests, which are often presented as objective tools, can actually perpetuate bias and limit opportunities.
So these things that are supposed to be objective and fair actually aren't?
Not necessarily.
O'Neill cites a study where identical resumes were sent out, some with white-sounding names and others with black-sounding names.
So what happened?
The resumes with white-sounding names received a staggering 50% more callbacks.
Wow.
It's crazy
It is.
that even in a seemingly neutral system, bias can creep in and have a real impact on people's lives.
It can.
And the worst part is the lack of transparency in these systems makes it almost impossible to challenge these unfair outcomes.
That's right.
You're rejected, but you don't even know why.
Exactly. You have no idea why.
And it's not just about getting hired. Once you're in the workplace, you might be subject to another layer of algorithmic control,
Oh, yeah.
workplace surveillance and optimization.
That's right. Companies are increasingly using data analytics and software to monitor and optimize worker productivity. But this also comes at the expense of the workers' well-being.
So the algorithm is basically treating workers like robots,
In a lot of ways, yes.
not humans.
That's right.
O'Neill tells the story of Jeanette Navarro, whose work schedule was constantly shifting,
Oh, wow.
generated by an algorithm, and it made it impossible for her to go back to school to try to improve her job prospects.
Oh, that's awful.
It's a classic example of how these systems can trap people in low-wage jobs with very little control over their lives.
With very little control.
It really does point to a deeply concerning trend.
Yeah.
It seems like these WMDs, by their very nature, prioritize efficiency and profit over fairness and human dignity.
That's right. And you have to remember that fairness is a complex concept that algorithms have a really difficult time grasping.
I can see how that would be true.
And when fairness is ignored, the consequences can be devastating,
Yeah.
especially for those who are already at a disadvantage.
It's a sobering thought. And we've covered a lot of ground already, but this is just the beginning of our deep dive.
Yeah.
In the next part, we're going to explore some potential solutions and countermeasures.
Okay.
We'll get into what individuals and society as a whole can do to kind of push back against these WMDs and try to ensure that algorithms are used ethically and responsibly.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Definitely.
We've seen how these WMDs can create problems in so many areas.
Yeah.
But let's zoom in on one that I think hits close to home for a lot of us.
Okay.
Credit scores.
Yeah.
This one number that has such a huge impact on our lives.
It's amazing, right?
It's become the ultimate measure of trustworthiness in our society.
It really has.
Need a loan,
Uh-huh.
want to rent an apartment.
Yep.
Your credit score can be the deciding factor.
It is.
And I think most people are familiar with the traditional like FICO score,
Right.
which is based on, your payment history, your debt load.
Mm.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah, you're judged on your actual financial behavior.
Yeah.
So the FICO score has its flaws, for sure,
Okay.
but it is at least relatively transparent, and it's based on data that is directly related to creditworthiness.
Yeah.
However, the world of credit scoring is getting a lot more complicated with the rise of e-scoring.
With scores.
Yeah.
These are the ones that kind of give me the creeps.
I know.
Because they take into account all sorts of data that seems totally irrelevant to my finances.
Totally. Yeah, e-scores go way beyond just your credit history.
Okay.
They incorporate data from your shopping habits,
Really?
your social media activity,
Oh, wow.
even your browsing history.
Like what websites I visit.
Uh-huh. And the problem is the algorithms that calculate these scores are often completely opaque.
Opaque.
You have no idea what factors are being considered or how much weight they're given.
So you could be penalized for something you didn't even know was being tracked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the scary part. Imagine this, your credit card company suddenly lowers your credit limit.
Okay.
You call them completely bewildered, and they tell you, well, it's because our e-score model flagged you as a risk.
But they can't tell me why.
But they can't tell you why.
That's incredibly frustrating.
It's so frustrating.
It's like being judged by this secret formula that you have no control over.
You have no idea.
And then how do you even challenge a decision
Right. How do you even begin to challenge it?
if you don't even understand how it was made in the first place?
Yeah, it raises serious concerns about fairness and transparency.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it's not just limited to credit scores.
What else are they using them for?
They're being used to determine insurance premiums,
Really?
job prospects,
Wow.
even housing options.
Wait, hold on.
Uh-huh.
They're using these shadowy scores to decide who gets a job or an apartment.
It's happening.
That seems wildly unfair.
The potential for discrimination is huge.
Yeah, I can see how that would be.
Because remember, even seemingly neutral data points can be proxies for things like race or socioeconomic status.
Okay.
For example, your zip code can reveal a lot about your income level.
And the neighborhood you live in.
Right, exactly.
So even if the algorithm itself isn't explicitly biased, the data that it's being fed can perpetuate these existing inequalities.
Exactly. That's a good point.
And it's not just about individual data points.
Okay.
It's about how the algorithm weighs and combines these factors.
Yeah.
This lack of transparency makes it almost impossible to know if an e-score is truly fair and accurate.
Okay, so this brings us back to like the central theme of our deep dive, right?
It does.
How can we ensure fairness in a world where algorithms are making these increasingly important decisions about our lives?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
It's a very complex challenge, but I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
The more people understand how these systems work and the potential harms,
Uh-huh.
the better equipped we are to demand change.
So education is key. Education is absolutely key. We need to shine a light on these hidden systems
Yeah.
and expose the potential for bias and discrimination.
And then on top of that, we need to demand transparency, right?
Absolutely. Transparency is crucial.
When an algorithm is making decisions that could affect my life, I think I have a right to know what data it's using and how it's coming to its conclusions.
I agree. It's like the principle of due process applied to the digital world.
Interesting.
You can't be judged without knowing the evidence against you.
That's a really good point.
And we also need to push for regulation.
Okay.
We need laws that protect individuals from algorithmic discrimination
Yeah.
and ensure that these models are being used responsibly and ethically.
So it's not just about raising awareness, it's about taking concrete steps to hold these companies accountable.
Absolutely.
Kathy O'Neill, in her book, proposes some interesting ideas. She argues that we need what she calls algorithmic audits.
Algorithmic audits.
Yeah, so these are like independent assessments of these models
Okay.
to determine if they're biased or discriminatory.
I like that idea.
It makes sense, right?
It does.
We audit financial institutions to make sure they're not engaging in fraud or corruption.
Right.
Why not do the same for algorithms that are making decisions that have a huge impact on people's lives?
I think that's a great idea.
I think so too.
It's about making sure that the math is serving us, not the other way around.
Yeah.
We need to shift that power dynamic so that these technologies are designed and deployed in a way that benefits society as a whole.
Absolutely. It sounds like a really daunting task, but I'm hopeful that with increased awareness and kind of a collective push for change, that we can actually create a more just and equitable digital world.
I share your optimism. I think there's a growing movement of researchers and activists and policymakers who are all working to address these issues and make sure that technology is used for good.
It's inspiring to see people fighting back and demanding better.
It is.
But I think it's also important to think about what we can do on an individual level.
Right.
What can we do to protect ourselves from becoming casualties of these WMDs?
That's a great question. And that's what we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture,
Right.
like the need for awareness and transparency and regulation. But let's get practical.
Okay.
What can we as individuals do to navigate this increasingly algorithmic world
Right.
and avoid becoming victims of these WMDs?
That's the question we should all be asking, right?
It is.
And while there's no easy fix,
Okay.
there are steps that we can take
Uh-huh.
to at least protect ourselves
Yeah.
and reclaim some control.
Okay. Give us the playbook.
Well,
What are some actionable steps?
I think the first thing is we need to be mindful of the data that we're generating.
Oh, yeah. Our data.
Every click, every purchase, every interaction online,
It leaves a trace.
it leaves a digital footprint.
Yeah. It's easy to forget that
It is.
when you're just, clicking and scrolling and sharing
Right. We're so used to it.
without thinking about the bigger picture.
Yeah, but companies are collecting vast amounts of data about us.
Yeah.
And they're using it to target us with ads to predict our behavior and even to influence our decisions.
So we need to be more conscious
Our conscious.
about what we're sharing and with whom.
Absolute.
So it's not about disconnecting entirely,
No,
but it's about being more deliberate
more deliberate about our digital lives.
with our digital lives. Okay.
Think twice before you post that controversial opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Or click on that, sensational headline.
Or that quiz that tells you what kind of dog you are.
Exactly. And be wary of free services.
Free.
Remember, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's an important one to keep in mind.
Yeah, it is. It reminds us that our data is valuable and
Yeah.
we shouldn't just give it away
We should have just given
without thinking about it.
Right.
Without considering the potential consequences.
to that.
What else can we do?
Well, another practical step is to actually take control of your privacy settings.
Oh, yeah, my privacy settings.
Most social media platforms and online services allow you to customize your privacy preferences.
Uh-huh.
So take the time to actually explore those settings and limit the amount of information that you're sharing publicly.
I'm so guilty of just clicking accept
Oh, I know, me too.
without actually reading the fine print.
It's so long,
It's so long.
but it's definitely worth taking a closer look at those settings.
I think you're right. And that else.
Yeah, and you can even consider using privacy-enhancing tools like VPNs or ad blockers.
Okay.
These can help to kind of shield your online activity from prying eyes,
So it's you're building this digital fence
right?
around your information.
Yeah, around your personal
Let's
information.
make that.
It's also important to know your rights.
Oh, yeah. What are my rights?
Well, in some cases, you have a legal right to access the data that companies are collecting about you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the General Data Protection
Yes,
Regulation,
the GDPR.
yeah, in Europe,
Okay.
and the California Consumer Privacy Act
The CCPA.
give individuals more control over their personal data.
So wait, I can actually demand to see what information they have on me.
In many cases, yes.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, you can request access to your data.
Okay.
You can ask for it to be corrected or deleted, and you can even object to how it's being used.
That's empowering.
It is.
It reminds me that I'm not powerless in this digital landscape.
You're not powerless at all.
So it's about knowing my rights
Mm,
and being willing to actually exercise them.
absolutely.
Okay.
And also, don't underestimate the power of collective action.
Oh, yeah.
There are all kinds of organizations and advocacy groups that are fighting algorithmic discrimination and promoting fairness in the digital world.
There are.
So get involved, support their efforts, and make your voice heard.
There's strength in numbers.
There is.
And I think ultimately we need to remember that algorithms are tools.
They are just tools.
They can be used for good or for bad. It all comes down to the intentions
Right.
of the people who are designing and deploying them.
Yeah, it's about the humans behind the algorithm.
So it's not about, like, rejecting technology altogether.
No.
It's about demanding that it serves humanity
Yes.
and not the other way around.
Well said.
So we need to be vigilant, informed, and engaged.
All of this.
And we need to demand transparency,
Yes.
accountability,
Mhm.
and fairness,
It's about fairness.
because these algorithms are shaping our world,
They are, whether we like it or not.
whether we like it or not.
It's up to us to make sure that they're shaping it for the better.
Well, this has been a fascinating and thought-provoking deep dive
It has.
into the world of algorithms.
Yeah.
It's a complex issue, but I feel like I have a much better understanding of, like, the stakes
Good.
and what we can do to navigate this evolving landscape.
I'm glad to hear that I encourage everyone listening to check out Cathy O'Neil's book,
Yeah.
Weapons of Math Destruction.
Weapons of Math Destruction.
It's a really eye-opening read
It is.
that will make you think differently about the role of algorithms in our lives.
It's a must-read for anyone who wants to understand
Yeah.
the forces that are shaping our world and how we can ensure, like, a more just and equitable future.
Absolutely. And remember, this isn't just about numbers and data.
It's about people.
It's about people.
It's about ensuring that technology is used to empower, not exploit.
That's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.
Yeah.
Because the future of our digital world really does depend on it.